What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I'm a musician and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. As always, I thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for rocking with me all this time. I know that we are in deeply confusing times, and everybody who hangs out with me and on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, I super appreciate all of y'all. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to get a reading, you can go to zambonifunk.com. I do Zoom calls. I do 10-minute readings, much like this one. I do all type of stuff for real. I do music also. I do a podcast. I've been trying to stay up on my content creation this way, so y'all have something interesting to listen to. There's a whole bunch of stuff. You can go to zambonifunk.com and check it all out there. Let's get to the music. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. I might sing a song at the end. We'll see. So this week looks even more confusing than the last. Let's think about this. So currently we've got Mercury retrograde. Always this is going to be associated with some kind of confusion, miscommunications, things being sent to the wrong place, things arriving in the wrong place, things, saying a thing and then it landing in a way that you hadn't expected, all this sort of stuff, right? Computer errors, all of that, right? So Mercury retrograde, that's just what that looks like, right? Mercury retrograde this week is going to move back into Leo. So we've got Mercury retrograde in Virgo right now, been hanging out there with Venus, and then it's going to move back into Leo, getting closer and closer to the sun. We're not going to quite see the cazimi this week. That's going to be next week. So we're really just seeing Mercury plunging deeper into the depths, underneath the beams of the sun. So the sun is too bright for everything, right? And so when a planet is close to the sun, it is under the beams of the sun, you can't see it. So usually that will sort of garble the message that planet is trying to get out. It's just like that planet has trouble functioning or operating, doing the thing that planet typically wants to do. So Mercury, the communication planet, is already moving backwards, already having trouble with the communication stuff. Then underneath the beams of the sun, it's like, really, this just makes no sense. There's zero understanding of what is happening out here in the world, right? So that is taking place, and that's interesting because we've got Venus in Virgo ruled by Mercury, and that Venus in Virgo is making a square to Mercury, or to Mars and Jupiter, who are in Gemini, the other Mercury sign, right? So Mercury has a very important job ruling a lot of the situation out here, and Mercury is confused as hell. So, if we're thinking Mars, Jupiter in Gemini, this looks like a very strong narrative. This looks like the kind of thing that, is easy to proclaim loudly, and especially get the feeling that you are right. This is a situation where you might be so convinced that you are right that it sort of blocks out other viewpoints. And even sometimes you can be right, but only partially right, or you miss a piece of the puzzle, and then that can sort of move you in a direction that could maybe be unhelpful in some kind of way. This looks like it is a very strong narrative that has that potential to be wrong in some kind of way. And so Venus in Virgo is going to check that ass. Venus in Virgo is very much for looking into the minute details of things, focusing on the flaws, the faults, where things could be a problem and this kind of thing, and sort of making that really obvious and pointing out where the things are not perfect and how you might improve that narrative. That looks like it wants to really kind of be a thorn in the side of that Jupiter and Mars in Gemini, who want to proclaim loudly and be victorious. Now, the thing that is also going on here with respect to that Mercury ruled confusing narrative and how much do we trust this, is that also we've got an opposition to Venus, or to Saturn in Pisces. So Venus in Virgo is making an opposition to Saturn in Pisces, who is also making a square to that same Mars, Jupiter in Gemini. So Saturn's job is to say no to things, to create boundaries, structures, infrastructure, all of this kind of stuff. In Pisces, this is very imaginative. This is very good for sort of working things out in the mind, in the dream space, where the rules are kind of the same, but also not really the same, right? There's something, it's deep ocean dynamics out there in Pisces, right? There's sea monsters and all that sort of stuff. Like, are sea monsters a real thing? Kinda. So Saturn in Pisces is sort of like looking at all that stuff and being like, okay, so what's really real about this? And so we've got a strong narrative going on. And that strong narrative is being checked by all this like little fact checking and all of this. And like, what even am a fact at this point? Like, is truth a real thing? Is capital T truth a real thing? Maybe they're all little t truths. And then if that's true, then that complicates the whole thing. And then we throw all that into the deep ocean dynamics of Pisces and see what happens out here. It looks like things are so wildly confusing that stuff doesn't really want to function properly. This looks like a great dynamic for delays or for things not running on time, or even like things running on time and then fucking shit up in a way that you hadn't imagined. All of that sort of stuff looks like it wants to take place here this week. So I would think that a good situation for us to think with is, how can slow or delayed or miscommunication even be used in a helpful kind of way? I might think about miscommunication as like carrying the possibility of double entendre or hidden meanings and this kind of thing, right? Like, this looks like the kind of situation where shooting straight at it doesn't look like it wants to work. There's all kinds of confounding influences. And so we might think that a better way to approach might be some kind of oblique way of thinking about things, right? So saying something about a true fact might just, you get endlessly mired in what constitutes a fact and what constitutes truth and all the rest of that, right? What constitutes intelligence or knowledge or any of this. Like, you just get mired in all of that. It's quicksand, right? But if you sort of like sidestep a little bit, you just like think a little more obliquely, we get into the realm of story and this kind of thing, right? So if we think about Saturn in Pisces as creating structure in the deep ocean dynamics, in the dream dynamics, then there's something here about world building that can be really useful, right? There's something about a metaphor or a story or a narrative, right? Speaking to that strong narrative that Mars and Jupiter are likely to want to create. There's something about that kind of world building that is not only compelling when it's done really well, right? Like, shout out to all the Lord of the Rings nerds who are, like on this channel and just out here in life, right? Like, the Lord of the Rings memes go so hard. And part of the reason why those memes go so hard, and memeing in general, is a really good idea here as well, right? Like, creating a premise and something hilarious that is maybe unexpected, but also wildly true, but then also maybe like, difficult to. One of the great things about memes is that it's hard to know that anyone else ever thought that thought, but then when you see that someone else thought that thought, then you think it's hilarious, right? That's part of what memeing is, and that is part of what we've got going on here. So you like can create a world which is sort of outside of reality, but also because it's so far outside of reality that it's back inside reality, right? We're sort of like looking at these extremes, and that's part of what an opposition is going to be, right? An opposition is going to be one thing on one side of things and another thing on the whole other side of things. And how do those things interact, right? Sort of like getting to that extremity. And then, so one of the ways that I often like to think about a T-square, which is what this is, right? Like the opposition in both of those points are squared by this other thing. Venus in Virgo, opposite to Saturn in Pisces, both of these are square to Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. The way that I like to think about that is that opposition is like the tension of a bowstring, and then you can pull on that bowstring from another point, and it increases the tension and creates a lot of possibility for projectile motion. And so there's something here that can really shoot toward the mark, but you're gonna have to go obliquely. This, if we're still using an archery metaphor here, then we might think about like accounting for wind or accounting for gravity and this kind of thing, right? Thinking with like the rules didn't change. You still gotta go to bed on time. You still gotta eat food and drink water and get hugs and all this sort of stuff, right? But even if the rules are what they are, then what kind of